My name is Faisal Shaikh. I'm a psychiatrist and founder of Mentis Clinic. So thank you everyone for coming and joining this talk by myself. And thank you to the organizers for organizing this show. I understand this is the 16th Autism and ADHD show, and it is my first, and what a privilege it is. I have traveled down from East Yorkshire, God's own country, as we like to call it, where we run Mentis Clinic, a mental health and neurodivergence service founded on 3 values: valuing, giving, enabling. Because whenever somebody seeks help, whether for autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, or simply life's challenges, they often arrive coming with one of 3 vulnerabilities: either the vulnerability of loss, or the vulnerability of humiliation, or the vulnerability of feeling trapped, or a combination thereof. And our values are very much the antidotes for these vulnerabilities. So for the vulnerability of loss, we have giving; for humiliation, we have valuing; and for feeling trapped, we have enabling. And these are our guiding principles in the clinic. But today, I don't want to talk primarily about our clinic. I want to talk about a journey that began in skepticism and a confession. For more than 25 years, I have worked as a psychiatrist. Yet for much of my early career, I was not fully convinced about ADHD in adults. In fact, I still remember attending a psychiatry conference in Dudley, West Midlands in 2008. The speaker was Philip Asherson, Professor Philip Asherson. Some of you may know the name. He's based at the Maudsley Hospital. I think he's retired now. I sat there silently, politely, listening. However, when I was asking questions, I thought that I was asking intelligent questions. Looking back, though, they were mostly skeptical questions that reflected my doubt and ambivalence about whether ADHD really persisted into adulthood. Today, I look back at that younger version of myself with some tinge of embarrassment, I must admit. Not because I was malicious, but because I simply did not know. Life had more teaching to do for me, and life, as it often does, became personal. My daughter, Nawaal, who this February 2026 turned 18, she's the eldest of 3 children I have, was diagnosed with autism at age 2 due to her being nonverbal. ADHD was also being considered. Suddenly, neurodivergence was no longer something I was reading about or practicing about. It was sitting at my dinner table, traveling in my car, living in my home. And over time, I began seeing things differently, not because I abandoned science, but because science and lived experience finally met. Today, I want to leave you with 3 messages. Number 1, diagnosis is not the end, it is the beginning. Number 2, different does not mean defective. And number 3, thriving happens through understanding, not masking. So let's start with these 3 points. Let's start with diagnosis. There's a debate taking place at the moment. Many of you will have heard it. Are we overdiagnosing autism? Are we overdiagnosing ADHD? As psychiatrists and mental health professionals, we should never be afraid of asking questions. Questioning is how science progresses. But after assessing hundreds and hundreds of individuals, I have reached a different conclusion. I do not believe we are suddenly creating autism. I do not believe we're suddenly inventing ADHD. I believe we are finally recognizing people who were previously overlooked, particularly women, particularly adults, particularly people who became experts at hiding their difficulties. Think of a dark room. When somebody switches on the light, the furniture does not suddenly appear. It was always there. We can simply see it now because we turn the light on. The people sitting in my consulting room are not seeking diagnoses as badges. They are seeking answers. They are seeking relief from years of asking, Why do I find life harder than everyone else around me? Why do I feel different? Why do I seem to struggle with things that look easy for other people? Diagnosis is not the destination. It is the map. It is the beginning of an understanding about yourself with compassion rather than criticism. So that's message one. My second message, that different does not mean defective. Let me give you an example. Left-handed people make up roughly 10% of the population. For centuries, left-handedness was viewed negatively. Children were forced to write with their right hand. In some languages, the very word for left carries connotations of weakness and wrongdoing. The problem was never left-handed people. The problem was that the world was built for right-handed people. I think neurodivergence is often similar. The world was largely designed around neurotypical expectations. And when somebody struggles to fit those expectations, we too quickly assume the person is the problem. But difference is not defect. My daughter Nawaal taught me this lesson. Many of us hear a crying baby on an airplane and think little of it. For Nawaal, that sound can feel physically overwhelming. Her nervous system experiences it differently. On one occasion, the resulting distress became so severe, and I kid you not, that we were removed from the aircraft. In airline jargon, that's called deplaning. We had to deplane as a family. Another time, we came very close. As a psychiatrist, I understood sensory overload intellectually. As a father, I'm experiencing it emotionally. And that taught me something important. What looks like difficult behavior is often overwhelming distress. What appears to be defiance may simply be an overloaded nervous system. Nawaal is not defective. She's uniquely wired, just as many of you are uniquely wired. And finally, third point, thriving happens through understanding, not masking. I have met many autistic and ADHD adults who have spent years trying to become somebody else, monitoring every word, every movement, every social interaction, trying desperately to appear normal. That must be exhausting. That is exhausting. Imagine spending decades acting a role. Eventually, the performance becomes harder than the challenge itself. The opposite of shame is understanding. The opposite of masking is belonging. And belonging happens when people feel psychologically safe and psychologically safe enough to be themselves. And on the concept of psychological safety, according to a recent American study, they concluded that a child learning to walk through crawling and walking falls on average 17 times per hour, according to that study, yet they keep trying. Why? Because they are in an environment where failure is expected and accepted. They feel safe. The same principle applies throughout life. People thrive when they feel safe enough to be authentic. That is why community matters. That is why advocacy matters. That is why education matters. At Mentis Clinic, we are trying to contribute in 3 ways. First, through rigorous and standardized assessments supported by technology and AI-assisted documentation. That is to help ensure our diagnostic quality and consistency, and hopefully that will address the concern that there may be some overdiagnosis of these conditions. Second, our clinic is building a community where we have a sense of belonging, advocacy, and that is through our membership program, which we hope to launch soon. And thirdly, through public education via our podcast, Be Yourself, Be Heard. Because the phrase be yourself isn't merely a slogan, it is an invitation to live authentically. And the slogan Be Heard is about creating the conditions where people feel safe and they belong, the concept of psychological safety, which I alluded to earlier. Before I finish, I would like to pay tribute to my parents, Dr. Faisal Shaikh and Mrs. Naseem Shaikh, both of whom love this country dearly, and in particular this very world capital, London. Neither lived in an era where neurodivergence was well understood, yet both taught me lessons that continue to guide my life: compassion, patience, generosity, and the ability to see the human being before seeing the problem. Those lessons shaped me as a psychiatrist, and those lessons, more importantly, shaped me as a father, and I believe those lessons are universal lessons that all of us can apply. So let me leave you with one final thought. You're not a failed version of somebody else. You are the first version of yourself. Let me repeat. You are not a failed version of somebody else. You are the first version of yourself. A diagnosis does not define who you are. It helps explain who you have always been. Different does not mean defective. And thriving begins not when you become somebody else, but when you finally understand yourself. Thank you. And I thank you, and I'd like to give my thanks to the Autism and ADHD Show to help create this event where people can truly be themselves and be heard. Very much the essence of my talk: be yourself, be heard.